According to Bernama and Reuters, a total of Rm 322.5 billion has been allocated for 2021, some Rm 7.8 billion more than the 2020 budget worth Rm 314.7 billion. The top 3 goals for Budget 2021 are: 1. Welfare of the people. 2. Business continuity. 3. Economic resilience. Around Rm 236.5 billion has been allocated for operational expenditure, Rm 69 billion for development and Rm 17 billion for the COVID-19 fund. Operational emoluments, Rm 84.5 billion. Debt repayment, Rm 39 billion. Services and supply, Rm 32.8 billion. Pensions, Rm 27.7 billion. State governments, Rm 7.7 billion. Subsidies, Rm 18.7 billion. Others, Rm 25.8 billion. Development economy, Rm 39 billion. Social, Rm 18.3 billion. Security, Rm 7.7 billion. General administration, Rm 3.8 billion. COVID-19 fund, Rm 17 billion. Civil service. Increase of allowance from Rm 6 to Rm 8 an hour for 1,900 volunteer firefighters. One-off payment of Rm 500 for 40,000 recipients of the Pingat Jasa Pahlawan Negara. Special Rm 600 for civil servants grade 56 and below. For retired civil servants and veterans with no pension, the government will provide Rm 300 special aid. Environment. Rm 50 million to clean rivers of rubbish and waste. Rm 40 million to strengthen enforcement and monitoring activities. Rm 10 million for island waste management projects in Johor and Terengganu. Rm 400 million for all states for biodiversity protection. Rm 20 million for the hiring of 500 former soldiers and police, as well as Orang Asli, to patrol forests. Government to build urban transformation center in Lembah Pantai with the assistance of the private sector. Job creation and social issues. Rm 100 million for NGOs involved in job creation, addressing social issues and environmental protection. This Rm 100 million grant will be matched with a Rm 100 million grant from GLCs. Rm 2 billion to continue the Green Technology Financing Scheme 3.0. Appointment of 100 new MAC officers. Sabah and Sarawak. Rm 5.1 billion and Rm 4.5 billion to improve infrastructure, health and education facilities in Sabah and Sarawak respectively. Economic corridors. Rm 780 million for development projects in economic corridors in Johor, Kelantan, Kedah, Sarawak and Sabah. Extension of tax incentives for economic corridors until 2022. Rm 150 million for the supply of raw water to Melaka. EPF to proceed with Rm 50 billion Kuasa Damansara development, which includes commercial and residential properties. It is expected to generate 100,000 jobs. Development. Rm 15 billion allocated for transport infrastructure projects including Pan-Borneo Highway, Gemas Johor Bahru Project and Klang Valley Double Track Project. Continuation of projects including the rapid transit system between Johor Bahru and Singapore and the MRT in the Klang Valley. Government to proceed with high-speed rail project, subject to discussions with Singapore. RM 3.8 billion for infrastructure projects including the construction of bridges and roads in several states. Syntax. Freeze on new import license for cigarettes. Tightening of renewal of import licenses for cigarettes. Restriction of transshipment of cigarettes to selected ports only. Imposing of tax with drawbacks on all transshipped and re-exported cigarettes. Barring of all transshipment and export of cigarettes using pump boats. Imposing tax on cigarette and tobacco products in all duty-free islands. 10% excise duty on e-cigarettes and non-electronic cigarettes, including vape. Digital transformation. RM 1 billion for digital transformation scheme. RM 150 million in grants for the digitalization and automation of small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. Nearly RM 1.2 billion for microcredit schemes. RM 10 billion for Sarakat Jamin and Pimbai and Pernigan BHD. RM 2.5 billion for G1 to G4 contractors for small and medium projects nationwide. MARA to provide RM 50 million in funding scheme for Bunaputra contractors. Tourism. RM 50 million for retraining programs for 8,000 airline staff. 500 jobs for Orang Asli and local communities to become tour guides in all national parks. RM 50 million for the maintenance and restoration of tourism facilities nationwide. RM 35 million for the Malaysia Healthcare Travel Council. Special RM 1000 grant for traders, taxi drivers, e-hailing drivers and tour guides in Sabah. Human Resource Development Fund levy exemptions for companies in the tourism sector and those still affected by COVID-19 for 6 months. Commodities. RM 20 million for sustainable palm oil certification programs. RM 16 million for latex production incentives. Government to open a furniture sector to create jobs in Paga. Agriculture. RM 50 million for organic agriculture project benefiting 1,000 communities. RM 150 million for modernization of fishermen vessels. RM 60 million for modernization programs in the supply chain. RM 100 million for high-impact and high-value agriculture and livestock. Development of local products. RM 150 million for training programs and assistance for 100,000 entrepreneurs. RM 150 million for the Shop Malaysia online initiative. RM 35 million to promote Malaysia-made products. Tax incentives for companies producing COVID-19 vaccines to invest in Malaysia. Science, Technology and Innovation. RM 400 million for selected ministries and agencies to carry out research and development, R&D. RM 100 million for research into diseases, including vaccine development. Investments in primary sectors. RM 1 billion to encourage investments in technology, including R&D for the electronic and aerospace industries, among others. RM 500 million to support companies involved in advanced technology and innovation. Tax incentives for certain industries will be extended to 2022. RM 1.4 billion to support the development of the domestic supply chain and increase the development of local products including medical devices. RM 3.7 billion to extend several schemes for maritime and logistics development, sustainable development, tourism infrastructure and public transportation sectors. RM 2 billion in targeted aid for SMEs. National Defense. RM 16 billion allocated to Defense Ministry. RM 17 billion to Home Ministry. RM 2.3 billion to maintain military assets. RM 27 million to improve the country's cybersecurity. RM 500 million for the construction of 1,000 homes for families of military personnel. RM 153 million for ALA. Transport. RM 300 million to expand the My30 unlimited travel pass to Penang and Kuantan, Pahang. Government to introduce unlimited monthly travel passes at RM 5 for students and the disabled. This includes train services in the Klang Valley as well as other parts of the country. Tax exemption for the purchase of new buses. Housing. Stamp duty exemption for first homes up to RM 500,000. RM 1.2 billion for the provision of homes for low-income house buyers. RM 500 million for 14,000 PPR units. RM 315 million for 3,000 room Mesra Rakyat. RM 125 million to repair dilapidated low-cost homes. RM 310 million for civil service homes. Government to work with selected financial institutions for a rent-to-own scheme involving 5,000 PR1MA homes. Education. RM 50.4 billion for the Education Ministry accounting for 15.6% of the budget. RM 420 million for the Supplementary Food Program for students. RM 725 million for dilapidated schools. RM 45 million for student welfare. RM 14.4 billion for the Higher Education Ministry. RM 50 million to improve facilities and infrastructure at public universities. RM 50 million to upgrade internet connectivity in universities from 500 Mbps to 10 Gbps. RM 6 billion for technical and vocational education and training, TVET. RM 300 million for loans for 24,000 TVET students. RM 29 million for TVET programs for students at Dafas and Pondok schools. Digital connectivity. RM 1.5 billion to ensure internet connectivity for the B40 group in the form of credit of RM 180 per person. This will benefit 8 million people. Telcos to provide RM 1.5 billion worth of data. RM 500 million for Jendela initiative, to boost internet connectivity in schools. RM 7.4 billion for MCMC to increase broadband service in 2021 and 2022. DLCs to contribute RM 150 million to the SERDIC fund for the purchase of laptops for 150,000 students in 500 schools. Youth and sports. RM 1,000 per month for 3 months for employers who hire fresh graduates for apprenticeship programs. One-off RM 50 e-wallet credit for those aged between 18 to 20 years old. This will benefit 1.5 million youths. RM 19 million for national health programs to encourage healthier lifestyles. RM 103 million to build, upgrade and maintain all sporting facilities nationwide. Tax exemption for sporting expenditure increased from RM 2,500 to RM 3,000. Rural development. Rm 2.7 billion for rural infrastructure projects. This includes Rm 1.3 billion for roads, Rm 632 million for water supply, Rm 250 million for electricity supply, Rm 355 million to build new houses and repair dilapidated houses, Rm 121 million to construct 27,000 lamp posts. Tax exemption and essentials goods, Part 1. 1% decrease in income tax for those earning between Rm 50,000 to Rm 70,000 per year. Rm 20 million to establish community centers for children to be looked after when school session ends. Rm 170 million for early childhood education under Chemis. Tax exemption for companies who hire senior citizens. Tax exemption for disabled couples increased from Rm 3,500 to Rm 5,000. Rm 158 million for social and development programs for the Orang Asli community, including the establishment of 14 new play schools. Extension of tax exemptions for companies who hire former convicts and drug addicts. Rm 50 million for repair and maintenance of houses of worship under local councils. Rm 100 million to empower the Indian community's socio-economic development. Rm 177 million to the Chinese community for education facilities and new villages. Rm 30 million to establish kindergartens in government buildings, especially hospitals. Rm 21 million to set up social support centers. Tax exemption and essentials goods, Part 2. Rm 95 million allocated to microcredit financing for women entrepreneurs. Rm 500 one-off payment to religious teachers and leaders, ACMR, expected to benefit nearly 70,000 people. Rm 1.4 billion allocated to the Prime Minister's Department for Islamic Affairs. Rm 4.6 billion allocated to empower Banaputra entrepreneurs. This includes Rm 6.5 billion to universities catered towards Bunaputaras. Rm 1 billion allocated for reskilling and upskilling programs. Government allocates Rm 2 billion to continue Penjana Kerjaya program under SACSO. Government to allocate 1.5 billion to extend wage subsidy programs for another 3 months, particularly in the tourism sector. Rm 3.7 billion for Skim Jamin and Pensionan Prakarj, Janakarja, to create jobs and improve skills. Rm 400 million to abolish Felda settlers' interest debts. Fishermen allowance to increase to Rm 300 a month. Rm 200 million allocated for distribution of essential goods. EPF contribution for employees reduced from 11% to 9% for 12 months. Beginning January 2021. Rm 24 billion for SACSO's Employment Injury Scheme. Delivery riders will also be included in this scheme. Rm 3,000 tax exemptions for contributors to private retirement schemes. EPF to allow contributors to withdraw from account 2 to purchase insurance. Government to allow contributors to withdraw Rm 500 a month from their EPF account 1 for 12 months from January 2021. Rm 150 million allocated to extend SACSO's job search allowance for 3 months. COVID-19 and public health. The COVID-19 fund ceiling to be raised to Rm 65 billion. Rm 1 billion to curb COVID-19 in the following ways. Rm 475 million for equipment and supplies for the Health Ministry. Rm 318 million for frontliners PPEs and hand sanitizers. Rm 150 million for the National Disaster Management Agency. Rm 50 million to purchase equipment, laboratory supplies and medicine in university hospitals. One-off payments of Rm 500 to frontliners. Rm 24 million for mental health programs. Tax exemption of up to Rm 1,000 for medical treatment expenses involving vaccination. Tax exemption of up to Rm 8,000 for treatment of serious diseases. Tax exemption of up to Rm 1,000 for health screenings. Tax exemption of up to Rm 8,000 for medical treatment, necessities and care for parents. My Salam and Perlindungan Tenang voucher program for the B40 to be expanded. Rm 90 million for pneumococcal immunization program for children. Aid for OKU increased to Rm 300 million. Aid for senior citizens increased to Rm 500 million. Allowance for OKU workers increased to Rm 450 million. In total, Rm 2.2 billion allocated for monthly welfare aid, which will benefit over 400,000 people.